I want to thank my patron supporters who are helping me to make more videos like this. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, please go to patreon.com/TJR, the original. My first experience hearing the song Riders on the Storm was as a young preteen boy during the early 70s when the song first made its way to radio. You have to remember this was at a time when popular music had not yet taken a hold of me. It was at a time when the most prevalent musical experience in my life was hearing the theme songs to my favorite cartoon TV shows. I didn't have a radio of my own back then, but if I sat quietly in my room, I could hear popular songs coming from a radio belonging to one of my older siblings, sometimes to a next-door neighbor. On one particular night, after I was sent to bed, I heard Riders on the Storm seep through the bedroom wall that my bed sat nestled against, and even then, its ominous, cinematic mood and tone affected me. The song put a dark, eerie vision in my head, a vision of a lone Western gunslinger on horseback riding in the night, a rainstorm beating down on him. I had no idea where this gunslinger was headed during that rainstorm, and I also knew that I didn't want to know. As I've grown older, Riders on the Storm and the imagery it inspired would continue to grow even larger in my mind. Until one day I decided I wanted to find out what was Riders on the Storm really about. This is TJR, and if you want to see more videos like this, please click like so that the YouTube algorithm recognizes me. Also click subscribe and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. In 1963, at Florida State University, future lead singer of The Doors, Jim Morrison, hears a lecture which influenced the lyrics of a song that he has yet to write. A song that will arguably be one of the greatest of his career. A career that in 1963, he probably wasn't planning on. The lecture he attended that day was a discussion of the German philosopher Martin Heidegger and his philosophical concept of thrownness. The concept of thrownness described human beings as individual existences being thrown into the world, that the societal conditions we are born into more or less determine our fate, rich or poor, good or bad, with little chance of escaping it. Years later, in a conversation with The Doors guitarist Robbie Krieger and keyboardist Ray Manzarek, German philosopher Thomas Kolmer would point this out and would make the argument that the line "into this world we're thrown" was a call-out to Heidegger's influence for the lyrics to the Doors song Riders on the Storm. Riders on the Storm would be released by the Doors in June 1971 on the album LA Woman. It was the last song on the album, and it was also the last song the band would record with lead singer Jim Morrison, not to mention the last music that Jim Morrison would record with anyone before fate would take him away forever. In a 2013 interview, guitarist Robbie Krieger has stated that the song was inspired by the country song Ghost Riders in the Sky, written and originally recorded by Stan Jones. Ghost riders in the sky. We were playing Ghost Riders in the Sky, and Jim was fooling around and came up with Ghost Riders on the Storm. When we recorded it, Jerry Schiff, the session bass player, just played what Ray Manzarek was playing on the keyboard with his left hand, and that's why it's so distinctive. It's not something a bass player would come up with. It has more of a jazz melody to it. Keyboardist Ray Manzarek also backs up this claim, but added that his keyboard-created bass part, while easy to play on keys, was very difficult for Schiff to play on bass. Which was another reason why this particular bass line was not something that most bass players would come up with. As a musician myself, I can attest to the fact that we try to make our jobs easy wherever we can. We come up with musical voicing and melody lines that are within easy reach of our instrument. So I believe that most bass players would not have come up with the one that was created by Manzarek. The introductory bass line to Riders on the Storm, as composed by Ray Manzarek, uses an arpeggio of an E minor chord and an A major chord. And you're basically rocking between the one note of the E minor to the 5 to the 3, like that. With the A chord, you're just simply going up and then going down. Now, it could be argued that it's an E minor to an A major with an E on the bass. But you could also say you're playing the A major in the 3rd position, which starts with the 5th note of the chord to the root to the 3rd, like that. Like so. However, I like to think of it as an A chord with an E in the bass, like that. Now, what I think is interesting about this pattern is that most guitarists would just match the root of the bass. So they would play an E minor and then an A major chord, like that. But Robbie Krieger actually moves between an E minor to a D major, like that. So altogether it's like this. And what's interesting about that is that the D major chord lands on the C sharp. But if you just play that D major chord by itself against that C sharp, it sounds awful. That sounds terrible, terrible by itself. But for some weird reason, when you play it in sequence, it works. After that, you just simply have a running A note, and you start out with an A minor, and then you just go from A minor to B minor to C major to D major. And it gives it this real feeling of just the music rising up. One thing I did notice while learning to play this is that there's a certain similarity to this and this. That's the Peter Gunn theme. One other thing that I want to point out about this song is that while you do have the sound effect of thunder and lightning in the background of this song, you also have Ray Manzarek's musical representation for rain as well. And it's the little lick that he plays at the beginning and at the end. I think you know which one I'm talking about. It goes like this. In 1969, Jim Morrison would produce and star in what is described as an experimental film entitled Highway, an American Pastoral. The film was also written by Jim Morrison, and in it, he would play a hitchhiker who commits a highway murder. In his original script, the character he plays is named Billy, and while not 100% confirmed, it is widely suspected that the script name of Billy is inspired from the real-life hitchhiker serial killer Billy Cook, who murdered 6 people during a 20-day journey between Missouri and California during the early 1950s. Billy Cook, who had endured a cruel and abusive childhood, would be sentenced to 300 years in prison, 60 years for each count, to be served at Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. These events would not only inspire Morrison's foray into film, but they would also have some inspiration on at least some part of the lyrics for Riders on the Storm. As the lyrics, "There's a killer on the road, his brain is squirming like a toad," give evidence to. But the life of Billy Cook also plays into Heidegger's concept of thrownness, the concept that our direction in life is determined by the surroundings we are born into or thrust into by chance, surroundings that as children we have no control over played some part in the sentencing handed down by the U.S. District Judge Stephen S. Chandler, who presided over the case. He said that he didn't believe the case warranted execution. He took into consideration the cruel and inhuman conditions that Cook was raised in and said that society must accept part of the blame. This crime might never have been committed had this boy been given a civilized upbringing and education. Or to put it into context, with the philosophy of thrownness, that Billy Cook was thrown into a life direction that he had no control over. Side note, this ruling would be overturned some years later, but that's another story. So is Riders on the Storm just about a serial killer? You might think so at first, but Ray Manzarek has also stated that the lyrics also express Jim Morrison's love for his longtime girlfriend, Pamela Courson. In essence, Riders on the Storm was a very filmic song about a serial killer, Manzarek added. Jim was way ahead of his time in the 1970s, but he was pulled into two directions writing it. He didn't want the song to be just about a killer hitchhiker. The last verse, "The world on you depends, our life will never end, you gotta love your man." It becomes a very spiritual song. You won't still occupy this body, but the essential life will never end, and love is the answer to all things. It gives the song a different perspective. Now, a more cynical argument from someone like myself would be that Jim Morrison simply ran out of lyrical ideas, and he just simply shifted gears for the last verse. But if that was so, you could also say that perhaps his subconscious was looking for an answer to the despair and bleakness that the concept of thrownness had given to the character of this song, and that perhaps love is greater than anything else, and that love is the best way forward for whatever bad hand life, as seen through the concept of thrownness, has dealt you. Either way, Riders on the Storm remains one of the most cinematic songs that I have ever heard, a musical character study into the mind of an individual walking down a very dark path, but also a song that gives the listener a reason to believe that there is always at least one way out of that darker path. This is TJR, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll look forward to reading your comments. Again, if you like what I'm doing here, be sure to click like, click subscribe, and smash the bell notification icon. You can join my Patreon page at patreon.com/TJR the original. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.